I took the job because I needed $43,000 before April. The recruiter didn't ask why. He slid the contract across the table at the hiring hall in Aberdeen, tapped the salary line with a chewed pen, and said the North Atlantic run paid double rate for 6-month minimum commitment, no days off. No early termination except medical evac. I signed. 3 days later, I was in a helicopter, watching Scotland shrink to a gray smear behind us. The pilot didn't speak except to tell me to keep my harness tight. The noise made conversation impossible anyway. I pressed my face to the window and watched the water change color as we flew green near the coast, then slate, then a black that looked solid until the rotor wash kicked up white caps. After 90 minutes, I saw it. Platform 7, a cluster of rust-orange steel rising from the water like a clenched fist. We landed on the helipad at 14:20. The crew chief, a woman named Voss, met me at the edge of the landing zone with a clipboard and a canvas duffel. She handed me the duffel and shouted over the rotors, "Your gear! Get to SeaDeck berthing before briefing. 1600 hours. Don't be late." I nodded. She turned and walked toward a steel door set in the superstructure. I followed. The door sealed behind us with a pressurized hiss. The sudden quiet made my ears ring. Voss led me down a corridor painted industrial yellow, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead. Everything smelled like salt water and diesel. The floor vibrated constantly, a deep mechanical pulse I felt in my teeth. "You're replacing Hendricks," Voss said without looking back. "He lasted 4 months. What happened to him?" "Medical evac." She stopped at an intersection, checked a laminated map bolted to the wall, and turned left. "You'll be on maintenance rotation. Night shift, 2200 to 0800. You work alone unless specified otherwise. Your supervisor is Kearns. He'll brief you." She stopped at another door. This one marked SeaDeck berthing 7 to 14. She pulled a key ring from her belt, selected a brass key, and unlocked it. "Berth 11. Your locker combination is in the duffel. Mess is D-deck forward. Briefing is in the conference room, B-deck aft. You have 90 minutes. She left before I could ask anything else. Berth 11 was a steel box barely wide enough for a cot, a wall locker, and a fold-down desk. The porthole was the size of a dinner plate, covered by a hinged steel shutter. I dropped the duffel on the cot and opened the locker. Inside, 2 sets of orange coveralls, steel-toed boots, a hard hat with a headlamp, work gloves, a thermos, and a ring of keys on a lanyard. A slip of paper taped to the inside of the locker door had my combination written in pencil. 143709. I changed into the coveralls and boots. The fabric was stiff and smelled like industrial detergent. I checked my watch, 14:55. I left the hard hat and keys in the locker and went to find the mess. D-deck was louder. I passed crew members in grease-stained coveralls carrying toolboxes and tablets. No one spoke to me. The mess was a low-ceilinged room with bolted-down tables and a galley counter. I got coffee from a dispenser, bitter and scalding, and sat alone near the porthole. Outside, the ocean stretched flat and empty to the horizon. At 15:50, I went to B-deck. The conference room had a long table and 12 chairs. Kearns was already there, sitting at the head of the table with a binder open in front of him. He was in his 50s, gray beard clipped short, deep lines around his eyes. He didn't stand when I came in. "Sit." I sat 3 chairs down from him. He closed the binder and looked at me for the first time. "You read your contract?" "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." "Good. Because I'm only saying this once." He opened the binder again and turned it toward me. Inside was a typed list, single-spaced, numbered 1 through 14. "These are the operational rules for night shift maintenance on Platform 7. You will follow them exactly as written. No interpretation, no exceptions. If you don't understand a rule, you ask me now. Once you start tonight, I'm off shift and unavailable until tomorrow at 1600 hours. Clear, clear. Read them." I pulled the binder closer. The text was precise, each rule a single sentence or short paragraph. No preamble, no explanation. 1. Night shift begins at 22 hours. Report to the main equipment locker on E-deck at 2150. Retrieve your assigned radio, flashlight, and toolkit. Sign the log. 2. Perform the primary walkthrough in the following order: E-deck machinery, forward to aft; D-deck living quarters, all corridors; C-deck storage, Bay 1 through Bay 8; B-deck offices, excluding the conference room; A-deck control observation, only do not enter. Complete this walkthrough before 23:33. Between 23:30 and 0:15, remain in the E-deck break room. The door to the break room must remain closed. Do not leave for any. Monitor radio channel 4. If you hear 3 short tones followed by 2 long tones, respond with your shift code NK7 and wait for acknowledgement. If you do not receive acknowledgement within 60 seconds, proceed to Rule 12. 4. At 0:15, begin monitoring the bilge pumps in Sublevel 1. Access Sublevel 1 via the portside stairwell only. The starboard stairwell is closed between midnight and 5. Record pump pressure readings every 15 minutes. Acceptable range, 40–48 pounds per square inches. If pressure drops below 40 or exceeds 50, radio dispatch immediately and do not attempt manual adjustment. 5. Do not enter Sublevel 2 under any circumstances. 6. Between 1 and 1:15, check all exterior watertight doors on D-deck and C-deck. Ensure each door is fully sealed. If you find a door unsealed, close it, test the seal, and log the door number and time. Do not investigate why the door was unsealed. 7. At 1:45, return to E-deck and inventory the emergency supply cabinet. Verify the following quantities: 12 flares, 6 batteries, D-cell, 3 flashlights, 2 radios, 1 first aid kit, 8 bottlenecks of potable water. If any item is missing, report to dispatch, but do not attempt to locate or replace the item until instructed. 8. If you encounter another crew member between 2 and 4, verify their badge color. Day shift wears blue badges, night shift wears orange badges. If you see someone wearing a blue badge during this window, do not speak to them. Continue your assigned tasks. Report the sighting to dispatch at your next scheduled radio check. 9. At 2:30, check the interior watertight door at the base of the portside stairwell on E-deck. If the door is closed, leave it closed. If the door is open, close it and secure the wheel lock. Do not look down the corridor beyond the door before closing it. 10. Do not respond to knocking on any door between 3 and 5. This includes exterior doors, interior doors, bulkhead doors, and storage bay doors. Continue your assigned tasks. 11. Between 3:30 and 4:15, perform a second inventory of Sublevel 1. Check all visible equipment for leaks, corrosion, or unusual residue. Take photographs of any anomalies and upload them to the maintenance server. Do not touch any residue. If you see standing water that was not present during your earlier check, exit Sublevel 1 immediately and radio dispatch. 12. If radio channel 4 goes silent for more than 5 minutes during your shift, switch to channel 9. Announce your shift code and location. Wait for acknowledgement. If you do not receive acknowledgement within 2 minutes, proceed to the E-deck break room and remain there until 6. Do not leave the break room for any reason until 6, or until you receive direct radio contact from dispatch. 1-3. At 5:30, begin the final walkthrough in reverse order. A-deck control, observation only. B-deck offices, excluding conference room. C-deck storage, Bay 8 through Bay 1. D-deck living quarters, all corridors. E-deck machinery, aft to forward. Complete this walkthrough by 7:14. Shift ends at 8. Return all equipment to the main locker on E-deck. Sign the log. Report any incidents or anomalies to the day shift supervisor in writing. Do not discuss incidents with other crew members. I read the list twice. Some of the rules made sense: radio checks, pressure monitoring, watertight door protocols. Others didn't. Why stay in the break room for 45 minutes? Why avoid someone in a blue badge? Why not look down a corridor? I looked up at Kearns. Rule 5. Why can't I enter Sublevel 2? Because it's in the rules. But what's down there? Nothing you need to worry about. He tapped the binder. Any other questions? Rule 8. What if someone in a blue badge tries to talk to me? Don't respond. Keep walking. And Rule 10. What if someone needs help? What if they're knocking because you don't respond to knocking between 03 and 05? His voice was flat. I don't care what you think you hear. You keep working. I looked back at the list. What happens if I break a rule? Kearns was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Hendricks broke a rule. Which one? Doesn't matter. He's gone. Kearns stood and closed the binder. Your shift starts in 6 hours. Get some rest. Don't be late. He left the room. I sat alone at the table, the binder still in front of me. I could hear the ocean against the platform legs, a rhythmic booming that came up through the floor. I thought about Hendricks, about medical evac, about $43,000. I thought about my sister's dialysis bills and the collection notices stacked on my kitchen counter back in Glasgow. I went back to my berth, set an alarm for 21:30, and tried to sleep. At 21:50, I stood in front of the equipment locker on E-deck, checking my watch every 30 seconds. The corridor was empty. Overhead, the fluorescent lights buzzed in their cages. The vibration from the machinery was stronger here, a steady thrumming that made the handrails hum. At 21:52, a door opened at the far end of the corridor. A man in orange coveralls walked toward me, a toolbox in one hand. He was younger than me, maybe 25, with a shaved head and a tattoo creeping up his neck. He stopped at the locker and set down the toolbox. You're the new guy. It wasn't a question. Yeah, I'm Ruiz. Day shift maintenance. He pulled a key ring from his pocket and unlocked the equipment locker. Inside, rows of radios, flashlights, toolkits, clipboards, everything labeled with numbers and letters. He took a radio from the top shelf, checked the battery indicator, and handed it to me. NK7, that's your call sign. Channel 4, unless you're told otherwise. Got it. He handed me a flashlight, heavy and rubberized, and a red toolkit the size of a briefcase. Sign the log. He pointed to a clipboard hanging on the inside of the locker door. I signed my name, the date, and the time, 21:54. Ruiz closed the locker and locked it. Kearns brief you. Yeah. You read the rules. Yeah. Good. He picked up his toolbox. Don't fuck up. He walked past me and disappeared through the door at the end of the corridor. I clipped the radio to my belt, hung the flashlight on a loop, and picked up the toolkit. It was heavier than I expected. I checked my watch. 21:57. 3 minutes until shift start. I opened the toolkit. Inside, wrenches, screwdrivers, a voltage tester, electrical tape, zip ties, a utility knife, a small hammer, a roll of nylon cord, and a laminated card with radio codes and emergency contact numbers. I closed the toolkit and waited. At 22 exactly, the radio crackled. All shifts, this is dispatch. Night rotation is active. Day shift, secure and report. Night shift, begin primary walkthroughs. Channel 4 monitored. Out. I pressed the transmit button. NK7, copy. Static, then. NK7, acknowledged. Out. I started the walkthrough. E-deck machinery was a maze of catwalks and equipment modules. Everything painted the same industrial yellow, every surface vibrating. I followed the corridor forward, checking valves and junction boxes as I went, looking for leaks or loose fittings. I didn't know what half the equipment did. I wrote down serial, numbers from data plates just to have something to record. At the forward end of E-deck, I climbed a ladder to D-deck. The living quarters were quieter. I walked the corridors, checking door seals and light fixtures. I passed a few open berth doors, empty rooms, cots made with tight corners. At the aft end of D-deck, I saw someone in a doorway, a woman in orange coveralls, her back to me. She was standing completely still, one hand on the door frame. I slowed. Evening. She didn't respond, didn't move. I stopped 10 feet away. You okay? Nothing. I could see her shoulders, the back of her head. Her hair was tied in a bun. She was wearing gloves. I checked my watch. 22:34. I looked back at the woman. She still hadn't moved. I thought about Rule 8 blue badges. Night shift, 02 to 04. It wasn't 02 yet. This woman was in orange. Night shift. I walked past her, keeping to the far side of the corridor. I didn't look at her face. I reached the stairwell and climbed to C-deck. The storage bays were dim, lit by emergency strips along the baseboards. I counted bays as I passed them. 1, 2, 3, each one filled with pallets of supplies wrapped in plastic. At Bay 5, I heard something moving inside. A scraping sound, metal on metal, rhythmic. I stopped outside the bay door. The sound continued. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. I knocked on the door. The sound stopped. I waited. 30 seconds, nothing. I moved on to Bay 6. By the time I finished the walkthrough, it was 23:22. I radioed dispatch and reported completion. They acknowledged. I went back down to E-Deck and found the break room. It was a small space with a table, 4 chairs, a sink, and a microwave bolted to the counter. A clock on the wall read 23:26. I set my toolkit on the table, poured coffee from my thermos, and sat facing the door. At 23:30, I closed the door. The room had no porthole. The only sound was the ventilation system, a low hiss from the grill near the ceiling. I sipped my coffee and watched the clock. The second hand ticked in perfect intervals. The minute hand jumped at 23:31. I turned the radio to channel 4 and set the volume to mid-level. Static filled the room, soft and continuous. At 23:47, I heard the 3 short tones followed by 2 long tones. I picked up the radio. NK7. Static. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. NK7. Acknowledged. Stand by. I set the radio down and exhaled. My hands were shaking. I didn't know why. The clock read 23:59 when I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. They were slow, deliberate, growing louder. I stared at the door. The handle didn't move. The footsteps passed and faded. At 0:14, I checked the clock one more time, picked up my toolkit, and opened the door. The corridor was empty. I walked to the portside stairwell and descended to sub-level 1. Sub-level 1 was colder than the rest of the platform. The air smelled like rust and brine. The bilge pumps were arranged along the starboard wall, 6 units in a row, each one the size of a car, painted gray, covered in pressure gauges and valve wheels. A metal catwalk ran the length of the level, slick with condensation. I walked to the first pump and checked the gauge, 44 pounds per square inches. I wrote it down in my notebook. Second pump, 46 pounds per square inches. Third, 43. Fourth, 47. Fifth, 45. Sixth, 44, all within range. I checked my watch, 0:23. Next reading at 0:38. I leaned against the railing and looked down the length of sub-level 1. At the far end, maybe 60 yards away, I could see another stairwell, the starboard stairwell, closed between midnight and 05. A metal door at the base, painted red. I couldn't tell if it was open or closed from where I stood. To my right, near the aft bulkhead, I saw another door. Steel, no window, no label, just a wheel lock. I assumed that was sub-level 2. I checked the time again, 0:27, 11 minutes until the next reading. I sat down on the catwalk, my back against the railing, and drank more coffee. At 0:38 I did the second round of readings, all within range. I radioed dispatch and reported. They acknowledged. At 0:53 I did the third round. Pump 4 had dropped to 42, still acceptable but lower. I noted it and moved on. Pump 5, 44. Pump 6, 43. At 1:08 I did the fourth round. Pump 4, 41, 1 point above minimum. I keyed the radio. Dispatch, NK7. Pump 4 at 41 psi. Within range but dropping. Advise, NK7. Acknowledged. Monitor and report if it drops below 40. Do not adjust manually. Out. I wrote it down. At 1:23 I checked again. 40 pounds per square inches exactly. I radioed dispatch. NK7. Pump 4 at 40 psi. Minimum threshold. NK7. Stand by. I waited, staring at the gauge. The needle didn't move. NK7. Maintain monitoring. Engineering is aware. Continue scheduled readings. Out. At 1:38 the gauge read 41. It had climbed a point. I exhaled and noted it. At 01, 53, 43. Back to normal range. I climbed the stairs to E-deck and checked the time, 1:57. I had 3 minutes before watertight door checks. I walked aft and started on D-deck. The first door was sealed tight. I tested the wheel lock firm. No give. I logged it. Door D4, 159, secured. The second door, sealed. Third door, sealed. I worked my way through D-deck, then moved to C-deck. At the aft end of C-deck, I found door C11 unsealed. The wheel lock was loose, the door slightly ajar, maybe 2 inches of gap. I grabbed the wheel and turned it clockwise until it locked. I tested the door. Sealed. I logged it. Door C11-27, unsealed, corrected. I didn't investigate why it was open. Rule 6. At 2:14, I returned to E-deck and went to the emergency supply cabinet. It was a steel locker near the portside stairwell, padlocked. The key was on my lanyard. I unlocked it and counted. 12 flares, 6 batteries, D-cell, 3 flashlights, 2 radios, 1 first aid kit, 8 bottles of water, everything accounted for. I logged it, locked the cabinet, and checked my watch. 2:19. I was ahead of schedule. I had 11 minutes before the portside watertight door check at 2:30. I sat down on a supply crate and drank the last of my coffee. At 2:22, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone descending from D-deck, moving fast. I stood and looked toward the stairwell. A man emerged, orange coveralls, hard hat, work gloves. He saw me and stopped. I looked at his badge. Blue, day shift. We stood 20 feet apart. He was breathing hard, his face flushed. He stared at me. I stared back. He opened his mouth like he was about to speak. I turned and walked aft, away from him, toward the machinery modules. I heard his footsteps behind me, quick, following. I kept walking. He kept following. I reached a junction in the corridor and turned left. His footsteps stopped. I glanced back. He was gone. I keyed the radio. Dispatch, NK7, sighting, blue badge on E-deck at 02:24. No interaction. Continuing assigned tasks. Out. NK7, acknowledged. Out. I checked my watch. 2:28, 2 minutes. I walked to the portside stairwell and descended to the base. The watertight door was self. There, massive steel, painted red, with a central wheel lock. It was closed. I turned and climbed back up. Rule 9, if the door is closed, leave it closed. At 2:47, I was on D-deck when I heard knocking. It came from below, somewhere on E-deck or deeper. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 3 more. I stopped walking and listened. The knocking repeated. Same rhythm, same intensity. I looked at my watch. 2:48, Rule 10. Do not respond to knocking between 03 and 05. But it wasn't 03 yet. It was 2:48. 12 minutes before the window started, the knocking came again. Louder. I walked toward the sound. It was coming from the direction of the portside stairwell. I descended to E-deck. The knocking had stopped. I waited at the base of the stairs. Silence. Just the hum of the machinery and the distant thrum of the platform structure. I checked the time. 2:54. 6 minutes until the no-response window. I climbed back to D-deck and continued my patrol. At 3, I was on C-deck when the knocking started again. This time it was above me, on B-deck. Same pattern. 3 raps, pause, 3 raps. I didn't respond. Rule 10. I kept walking. The knocking followed me. It moved from B-deck to C-deck, always a few seconds behind where I was walking. At Bay 4, I heard it directly on the other side of the storage bay door. Loud, insistent. I kept walking. At 3:17, the knocking stopped. I was alone in the corridor. I checked my watch, logged the time, and radioed dispatch. NK7, reporting knocking sounds on C-deck between 0300 and 0317. No response given. Continuing patrol. Out. NK7, acknowledged. Out. At 3:30, I descended to sub-level 1 for the second inventory. The bilge pumps looked the same. I walked the catwalk slowly, checking each unit for leaks or unusual residue. Everything was dry. I took photographs with my tablet, required documentation, uploaded to the maintenance server. At the far end of the level, near the starboard stairwell, I saw the red door. It was closed. I started to turn back when I noticed something on the catwalk near the door. Footprints, wet, recent, leading from the red door to the middle of the catwalk, then stopping. Not fading or drying, just stopping, as if whoever left them had simply evaporated mid-step. I took a photograph, uploaded it. I didn't approach the prints. I didn't touch them. I climbed back to E-deck and radioed dispatch. NK7, anomaly on sublevel 1, wet footprints near starboard stairwell. Photographed and uploaded. No equipment leaks observed. Out. NK7, acknowledged. Continue assigned tasks. Out. At 4:15 I left sublevel 1 and started the final walkthrough at 5:30. I worked backward through A-deck, B-deck, C-deck, D-deck, E-deck. Everything was quiet. No more knocking, no more footsteps. At 6:47 I finished and returned to the equipment locker. At 7:58 I signed the log and returned the radio, flashlight, and toolkit. At 8 the day shift. Supervisor, a man named Greer, met me outside the locker. He was tall, late 40s, graying hair, clipboard in hand. Anything to report? I told him about door C11, the blue badge sighting, the knocking, and the footprints. He wrote everything down without comment. When I finished, he looked up from his clipboard. You followed the rules? Yes. Good. Get some rest. He walked away. I went back to my berth, sealed the door, and lay down on the cot. My body ached. My eyes felt full of sand. I set an alarm for 15 and closed my eyes. I didn't dream. I woke to the alarm and dressed in the dark. My watch read 15 exactly. I went to the mess, ate scrambled eggs and toast that tasted like cardboard, and drank 3 cups of coffee. At 15:50 I went to the conference room. Kearns was waiting. He sat in the same chair, the binder open in front of him. He gestured for me to sit. Greer gave me your report, he said. You did fine. One thing. What? The knocking. He looked at me. You didn't respond, right? No, I kept working. Good. He closed the binder. It'll happen again. Maybe every night. Maybe once a week. Doesn't matter. You don't respond. You don't investigate. You don't try to figure out where it's coming from. You just keep working. What if someone actually needs help? No one needs help between 03 and 05, he said. If they're knocking during that window, they're not someone you want to help. I thought about that. And the footprints? Engineering will handle it. He stood. Your shift starts in 6 hours. Don't be late. He left. I sat alone in the conference room. Outside the porthole, the ocean was gray and choppy. I could see waves cresting, white foam catching the light. A storm was coming. The second night was the same as the first, except the knocking started earlier. At 2:37 I heard it on D-deck, outside the berthing corridor. I kept walking. At 3:09 it moved to E-deck. At 3:44 it stopped. At 4:15 I went to sublevel 1. The footprints were gone. The catwalk was dry. I did the inventory, took photographs, and climbed back to E-deck. No other incidents. On the third night, I found door C11 unsealed again. Same door. I closed it, tested the seal, logged it. At 2:58 I heard the knocking on B-deck, but it stopped before the 03 window started. On the fourth night, I saw the man in the blue badge again. This time, he was on C-deck, standing at the far end of the corridor near Bay 8. He didn't move when he saw me. I turned and walked the other direction. I radioed dispatch. They acknowledged. On the fifth night, the bilge pump pressure dropped to 39 pounds per square inches. I radioed dispatch immediately. They told me to monitor. It climbed back to 42 within 15 minutes. I logged it. On the sixth night, I heard voices. It was 3:23. I was on D-deck, checking door seals. The voices came from one of the berths, 2 people, talking in low tones. I couldn't make out the words. I stopped outside the door and listened. The conversation stopped. I waited. Silence. I knocked. No response. I opened the door. The room was empty. Cot made, locker closed, porthole shuttered. I checked the room number, berth 9. I logged it and moved on. At 4:02 I heard the voices again, this time on C-deck. Same low tones, same indistinct words. I didn't investigate. I kept walking. On the 7th night, the radio went silent. It was 1:34. I was on sub-level 1, doing pump readings. The static on channel 4 cut out suddenly, replaced by complete silence. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. At 5 minutes, I switched to channel 9. Dispatch, this is NK7. Channel 4 is silent. Requesting acknowledgement on channel 9. Over. Static. I waited. 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. At 2 minutes, I climbed the stairs to E deck and went to the break room. I closed the door and sat at the table. I checked my watch. 1:41. 4 hours and 19 minutes until 6. I was not to leave the break room for any reason until 6 or until I received direct radio contact from dispatch. I waited. At 2:15, I heard footsteps in the corridor. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They stopped outside the break room door. I stared at the door handle. It didn't move. The footsteps resumed. They walked away. At 3:07, I heard knocking. 3 raps. Pause. 3 raps. Directly on the break room door. I didn't respond. The knocking continued for 6 minutes, then stopped. At 3:45, the radio crackled back to life. All units, this is dispatch. Channel 4 is restored. Night shift, respond with status. Over. I keyed the radio. NK7. In E-deck break room per emergency protocol. No incidents. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Resume assigned tasks. Out. I checked my watch. 3:47. I had missed the O230 watertight door check and the O330 sub-level 1 inventory. I opened the break room door and resumed my patrol. At 4:15, I went to sub-level 1 and did the inventory. At 5:30, I started the final walkthrough. Everything else was routine. On the 8th night, Kearns called me to the conference room before shift start. Sit, he said. I sat. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Amendments. I picked it up. 6 new rules, typed in the same format as the original list, numbered 15 through 20. 15. If you encounter a crew member who asks you for the time, do not answer. Instead, ask them for their badge number. If they provide a number, verify it against the roster posted in the E-deck break room. If they do not provide a number, or if the number is not on the roster, do not engage further. Report the encounter to dispatch at the next scheduled radio check. 16. If door C11 is found unsealed more than twice in a single shift, do not close it on the 3rd occurrence. Instead, radio dispatch immediately and wait for instructions. Do not enter Bay 11 or Bay 12 until cleared by dispatch. 17. Do not use the starboard stairwell between midnight and 5 under any circumstances, even if instructed otherwise by someone claiming to be a supervisor or dispatch. If you receive such an instruction, request verification of their shift code. If they cannot provide a valid shift code, disregard the instruction. 18. If you observe any crew member standing completely motionless for more than 60 seconds, do not approach them. Mark their location and report to dispatch. Continue your assigned tasks. 19. If the emergency supply cabinet is found unlocked at any time, do not open it. Lock it immediately and radio dispatch. Do not inventory the contents. 20. If you hear your name called between 3 and 5, do not respond and do not turn toward the source of the voice. Continue your assigned tasks as if you heard nothing. I read the list 3 times. When I looked up, Kearns was watching me. Questions? Why the amendments? Because things change. He stood. You start in 90 minutes. Don't be late. He left. I sat alone with the paper. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. That night, at 2:16, someone asked me for the time. I was on D-deck, checking a junction box near the galley. A woman approached from the forward corridor, orange coveralls, hard hat, no visible badge. She stopped 10 feet away. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you have the time?" I looked at her face. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, tired eyes. I didn't recognize her. "What's your badge number?" I asked. She blinked. "Sorry?" "Your badge number." She looked down at her chest where her badge should have been clipped to her coveralls. There was nothing there. She looked back at me. I must have left it in my berth. "What's the number?" She hesitated. "I don't remember." I stepped back. "I can't help you." She stared at me for 3 seconds. Then she turned and walked back down the corridor, her footsteps quick and uneven. I waited until she was out of sight, then keyed the radio. Dispatch, NK7, encountered crew member on D-deck at 0216. No badge visible. Asked for time. Could not provide badge number. No further engagement. Out. NK7, acknowledged. Out. At 3:34, I heard my name. I was on C-deck, near Bay 6. The voice was clear, female, coming from somewhere behind me. Hey, you. Yeah, you. I kept walking. The voice called again. Can you help me real quick? I didn't respond. I turned the corner and continued my patrol. At 4:15, I descended to sublevel 1. The bilge pumps were normal. I walked the catwalk, checking for leaks and residue. At the aft end, near the red door, I saw something new, a wet handprint on the door. 5 fingers, palm, clear and distinct, fresh. I took a photograph, uploaded it. I didn't touch the door. I climbed back to E-deck and radioed dispatch. NK7, anomaly on sublevel 1, wet handprint on door to sublevel 2, photographed and uploaded. No other anomalies observed. Out. NK7, acknowledged. Engineering notified. Continue assigned tasks. Out. At 7, I finished the final walkthrough. At 8, I met Greer outside the equipment locker. Anything to report? I told him about the woman with no badge, the voice calling my name, and the handprint. He wrote it down. You followed the rules? Yes. Good. Get some rest. The nights blurred together after that. The routine became automatic. Equipment locker, walkthrough, break room, bilge pumps, door checks, inventory, patrol, final walkthrough log. The hours between 22 and 8 felt like a separate world, disconnected from daylight and normal work. The knocking continued, sometimes every night, sometimes skipping a night. It never came from the same location twice in a row. I learned to ignore it. The voices continued. Sometimes I heard my name. Sometimes I heard conversations. Once I heard someone crying, soft and muffled, coming from an empty berth. I logged it and moved on. Door C11 stayed sealed for a week, then I found it unsealed again. Once, I closed it. The next night it was unsealed again. Twice, I closed it. The next night it was unsealed again. 3 times. I radioed dispatch and waited. They told me to leave it open and avoid Bay 11 and Bay 12. I complied. I saw the man in the blue badge 4 more times, always at a distance, always motionless, always watching. I stopped reporting it after the 3rd sighting. Dispatch had acknowledged each one the same way. NK7, acknowledged. On the 15th night, I found the emergency supply cabinet unlocked. It was 1:45, time for inventory. I approached the cabinet and saw the padlock hanging open on the hasp. The door, slightly ajar. I stopped 5 feet away. I didn't open it. I didn't look inside. I reached forward carefully, closed the door, and locked the padlock. I tested it. Secure. I radioed dispatch. NK7. Emergency supply cabinet found unlocked at 0146. Secured without opening. Out. NK7. Acknowledged. Do not inventory. Continue assigned tasks. Out. At 2:30, I checked the watertight door at the base of the port side stairwell. It was open. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down. The red door was fully open, the dark corridor beyond it visible. I could see maybe 10 feet into the corridor, bare concrete, steel pipes along the ceiling, emergency lighting strips casting a dim red glow. Rule 9. If the door is open, close it. Do not look down the corridor before closing it. I had already looked. I descended the stairs slowly, my eyes on the open door. I reached the base and grabbed the wheel lock. I pulled the door closed. It moved smoothly, sealing with a heavy thud. I turned the wheel clockwise until it locked. I tested it. Secure. I climbed back to E-deck and continued my patrol. At 3:15, I heard footsteps behind me on C-deck. Quick, light, keeping pace with my own. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. The footsteps followed me past Bay 3, Bay 4, Bay 5. At Bay 6, I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I waited. 30 seconds. The footsteps resumed, moving past me, continuing down the corridor. I heard them reach the end of the corridor. Then silence. I turned. The corridor was empty. At 4:15, I went to sublevel 1. The handprint on the red door was still there. I took another photograph. The print looked exactly the same, no fading, no drying, as if it had just been placed. On the 16th night, I met another night shift worker. It was 1-7. I was on E deck, near the port side stairwell. A man emerged from the break room, orange coveralls, orange badge, toolkit in hand. He was older, maybe 50, with a weathered face and graying beard. He nodded at me. NK7? Yeah, I'm Pardee, NK3. He held up his badge. I could see the number clearly. NK3. You been here 2 weeks? About that. How you holding up? Fine. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You will be. Just keep your head down and follow the rules. He started to walk past me, then paused. You heard the stories? What stories? About the platform. About why we have the rules. No. He looked at me for a long moment. Good. Don't ask. It's easier that way. He walked aft, his footsteps fading. I watched him go, then continued my patrol. At 2:30, I checked the watertight door. It was closed. I left it closed. At 3, the knocking started. It was louder than usual, more insistent. It followed me through C deck, D deck, and back to E deck. At 3:28, it stopped. At 4:15, I descended to sublevel 1. The bilge pumps were normal. I walked the catwalk, checking equipment. At the far end, I saw Pardee. He was standing near the red door, his back to me, completely motionless. I checked my watch. 4:18. I counted. 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30. He didn't move, not an inch. 60 seconds. Rule 18, do not approach. Mark location and report. I climbed the stairs to E deck and radioed dispatch. NK7, crew member NK3, observed on sublevel 1, near starboard stairwell, motionless for over 60 seconds. Per Rule 18, no approach made. Out. NK7, acknowledged. Continue assigned tasks. Out. I didn't go back to sublevel 1 that night. At 5:30, I started the final walkthrough. I didn't see Pardee again. At 8, Greer asked if I had anything to report. I told him about Pardee. He wrote it down without expression. You followed the rules? Yes. Good. On the 18th night, Kearns called me to the conference room at 15:50. Sit. I sat. He slid another sheet of paper across the table. More amendments. I picked it up. 4 new rules, numbered 21 through 24. 21. If you observe condensation on any interior wall that forms a pattern resembling a handprint, footprint, or face, do not touch it. Photograph it, upload it, and report it to dispatch. Mark the location and avoid that area for the remainder of your shift. 22. If you complete your final walkthrough and discover you have returned to the same location twice without retracing your steps, stop immediately. Radio dispatch and wait for instructions. Do not continue walking. 23. If you find an item in your toolkit that you did not place there, do not use it. Do not remove it from the toolkit. Report it to dispatch at the end of your shift. 24. If you encounter a locked door that you know was previously unlocked, do not attempt to open it. Mark the door. Number and report to dispatch. Do not wait near the door. I read the list twice. Why now? Because we're entering storm season, Kearns said. Things get worse during storms. Worse how? You'll see. He stood. Your shift starts in 90 minutes. That night, at 0:47, the storm hit. I was on sublevel 1, checking bilge pumps, when the platform shuddered. The vibration changed deeper, more violent. The pumps groaned. I grabbed the railing as the floor tilted slightly, then righted itself. The radio crackled. All units, this is dispatch. Storm conditions in effect. Maintain current protocols. Emergency procedures may be activated. Stand by. Out. I checked the pump gauges, all within range, but the needles were fluctuating 42, 44, 43, 45. The readings weren't stable. I radioed dispatch. NK7. Bilge pumps showing fluctuation, all within range but unstable. Advise. Over. NK7. Monitor closely. Report if any reading drops below 40 or exceeds 50. Out. I stayed on. Sub-level 1, watching the gauges. The platform shuddered again, harder this time. A tool fell from a maintenance shelf and clattered across the catwalk. I retrieved it and set it back. At 1:15, the lights flickered. Once, twice, they stayed on. I climbed to E-deck for the door checks. The platform was rolling now. Not much, but enough to make walking feel strange, like the floor was moving beneath me before I took the step. On D-deck, I found 3 doors unsealed. I closed them all, tested the seals, logged them. On C-deck, I found door C11 unsealed. First time, I closed it. At 1:45, I went to the emergency supply cabinet. The padlock was secure. I inventoried the contents, everything accounted for. At 2, the lights went out. Complete darkness. The hum of the ventilation stopped. The only sound was the storm battering the platform and the deep groan of the structure flexing. I stood perfectly still, one hand on the wall, and waited. Emergency lighting kicked in after 5 seconds. Red strips along the baseboards, barely enough to see. The radio crackled. All units, this is dispatch. Primary power failure. Emergency lighting active. Night shift. Proceed to E-deck break room and stand by for emergency protocols. Acknowledge. Over. I keyed the radio. NK7. Acknowledged. Proceeding to E-deck break room. Over. I walked carefully through the red-lit corridors, one hand on the wall, counting my steps. At the break room, I opened the door and went inside. I closed the door and sat at the table. The radio crackled again. NK7, this is dispatch. Confirm you are in E-deck break room. Over. NK7, confirmed. Break room secured. Over. NK7, stand by for emergency protocols. Out. I waited. The platform groaned. Metal flexed. The storm roared outside, muffled by layers of steel and insulation, but still audible. A constant howling. At 2:14, the radio crackled. NK7, this is dispatch. Emergency protocols are now active. You will receive instructions in sequence. Acknowledge each instruction and report completion. Do not deviate. Over. NK7, acknowledged. Standing by. Over. NK7, first instruction. Exit the break room and proceed to sub-level 1 via the portside stairwell. Verify all 6 bilge pumps are operational. Report readings and any anomalies. Time limit, 15 minutes. Begin now. Over. I checked my watch. 2:15. I picked up my toolkit and flashlight and left the break room. The corridors were dim, lit only by the red emergency strips. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness in a narrow cone. I walked to the portside stairwell and descended. Sub-level 1 was colder than usual. I walked the catwalk, checking pumps. Pump 1, 43 pounds per square inches. Pump 2, 45. Pump 3, 44. Pump 4, 41. Pump 5, 46. Pump 6, 43. All within range, all operational. I reached the far end of the catwalk and turned back. My flashlight beam swept across the red door to sub-level 2. The handprint was gone. The door was clean. I stopped. I stared at the door. The handprint had been there for over a week. Photographed, documented. Now it was gone, the steel surface unmarked. I took a photograph of the clean door and uploaded it. At 2:27, I climbed back to E-deck and radioed dispatch. NK7. Sub-level 1 bilge pumps verified operational. All readings within normal range. Anomaly noted. Wet handprint on sub-level 2 door is no longer present. Door surface clean. Photographed and uploaded. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Second instruction. Proceed to C-deck. Check all storage bay doors in sequence from Bay 1 to Bay 8. Report any unsealed doors. Time limit, 20 minutes. Begin now. Over. I checked my watch. 2:29. I climbed to C-deck. The corridor was darker here. My flashlight beam revealed only a few feet ahead. I walked forward, counting bays. Bay 1, door sealed. Bay 2, sealed. Bay 3, sealed. Bay 4, sealed. At Bay 5, I heard something moving inside. The same scraping sound I'd heard on my first night, metal on metal, rhythmic. I stopped outside the door. The sound continued. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. I didn't open the door. I moved on. Bay 6, sealed. Bay 7, sealed. Bay 8, sealed. I walked back to Bay 5 and listened again. The scraping had stopped. At 2:44, I radioed dispatch. NK7, C-deck storage bays verified. All doors sealed. Noted. Sound of metal scraping observed from inside Bay 5. No door breach detected. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Third instruction. Proceed to the portside watertight door at the base of the E-deck stairwell. If the door is closed, verify the wheel lock is secure. If the door is open, close it and secure the wheel lock. Report status. Time limit, 10 minutes. Begin now. Over. I checked my watch. 2:46. I descended to the base of the portside stairwell. The red door was open, fully open. The dark corridor beyond it was visible in my flashlight beam. I could see farther this time, maybe 20 feet. Pipes, concrete, shadows. I grabbed the wheel lock and pulled. The door was heavy. I had to use both hands. It swung closed slowly, sealing with a thud. I turned the wheel clockwise until it locked. I tested it. Secure. I climbed back to E-deck and radioed dispatch. NK7. Portside watertight door was open, now closed and secured. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Fourth instruction. Return to the E-deck break room. Remain there until further instructions. Monitor channel 4. Do not leave the break room for any reason until instructed. Over. I checked my watch. 2:53. I returned to the break room, closed the door, and sat at the table. The storm had intensified. The platform shuddered every few seconds, the groaning of metal constant. I could feel the structure flexing beneath me, shifting slightly, never quite settling. At 3:07, I heard knocking. On the break room door, 3 raps. Pause. 3 raps. I didn't respond. The knocking continued. At 3:15, it stopped. At 3:33, the lights flickered and came back on. Full power. The ventilation hum resumed. The radio crackled. All units, this is dispatch. Primary power restored. Emergency protocols remain in effect. Night shift. Stand by. Over. At 3:45, the radio crackled again. NK7, this is dispatch. Fifth instruction. Perform a complete walkthrough of all levels in the following sequence: E-deck, D-deck, C-deck, B-deck, A-deck. Report any unsealed doors, anomalies, or safety hazards. Time limit, 60 minutes. Begin now. Over. I checked my watch. 3:46. I left the break room and started the walkthrough. E-deck was normal. Machinery humming, lights on, no anomalies. D-deck was quiet. All doors sealed. I checked the berthing corridor, every door closed. No sounds, no movement. C-deck storage bays, all sealed. No sounds from Bay 5. At Bay 7, I noticed something. Condensation on the wall, forming a pattern. I stepped closer and aimed my flashlight at it. A handprint, 5 fingers, palm, clear and distinct. I photographed it, uploaded it, marked the location, and moved on to B-deck. The offices were empty. I checked each room: desks, chairs, filing cabinets, all in place. At the far end of the corridor, I saw the conference room door. It was closed. I wasn't supposed to enter. Rule 2. B-deck offices, excluding the conference room. I moved on to A-deck. The control room was behind thick glass. I stood outside and observed. Monitors, consoles, status boards. Everything looked normal. No personnel inside. Observation only. Rule 2. At 4:38, I radioed dispatch. NK7. Complete walkthrough finished. 1 anomaly noted. Condensation handprint on C-deck near Bay 7. Photographed and uploaded. All doors sealed. No other anomalies or hazards observed. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Emergency protocols are now concluded. Resume standard operational protocols. Continue assigned tasks. Out. I checked my watch. 4:40. I was 35 minutes behind schedule. I had missed the 0415 sub-level 1 inventory. I descended and performed it. Everything normal. The red door was clean. No handprint. No residue. At 5:30, I began the final walkthrough. At 7, I finished. At 8, I signed the log and met Greer. Storm protocols? Yes. You followed the emergency instructions? Yes. Good. Get some rest. The next night, the storm was gone. The ocean was calm. The platform had stopped shuddering. I started my shift at 22 and completed the primary walkthrough by 23:25. At 23:30, I sat in the break room and waited for the radio tones. They came at 23:47. I acknowledged. Everything was routine. At 1:45, I checked the emergency supply cabinet. The padlock was secure. I inventoried. Everything accounted for. At 2:16, I saw the man in the blue badge again. He was on E-deck, standing near the portside stairwell. He didn't move when I approached. I walked past him without looking at his face. I radioed dispatch. They acknowledged. At 3, I heard my name. I didn't respond. At 4:15, I went to sublevel 1. The bilge pumps were normal. I walked the catwalk, checking equipment. At the red door, I stopped. The handprint was back, fresh, wet. I took a photograph, uploaded it. I didn't touch the door. I climbed back to E-deck and radioed dispatch. NK7. Anomaly on sublevel 1. Wet handprint has reappeared on door to sublevel 2. Photographed and uploaded. No other anomalies. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Engineering notified. Out. At 7, I finished the final walkthrough. At 8, I met Greer. I reported the handprint. He wrote it down. You followed the rules? Yes. Good. On the 23rd night, I found something in my toolkit. It was 22:14. I was on E-deck, checking a junction box, when I opened the toolkit for a screwdriver. Inside, nestled between the wrenches, was a small brass key. I didn't recognize it. I hadn't put it there. I closed the toolkit without touching the key. Rule 23. Do not use it. Do not remove it. I continued my patrol. At 8, I reported it to Greer. He wrote it down and told me to leave the toolkit in the equipment locker. A replacement would be ready for my next shift. On the 24th night, I found door C11 unsealed. Third time, I radioed dispatch. They told me to leave it open and avoid Bay 11 and Bay 12. At 2:30, I checked the port side watertight door. It was closed. I left it closed. At 3, I heard knocking on D-deck. I ignored it. At 4:15, I descended to sublevel 1. Pardee was there again, standing near the red door, motionless. I counted 60 seconds. He didn't move. I marked his location and reported it to dispatch. They acknowledged. On the 25th night, I completed the final walkthrough and realized I had returned to the same location twice. It was 6:23. I was on C-deck, walking aft. I passed Bay 4, then Bay 5, then Bay 6. I reached the end of the corridor and turned left. I walked forward. I passed Bay 6, then Bay 5, then Bay 4. The same corridor, the same sequence. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't retraced my steps. I stopped. Rule 22. Radio dispatch and wait. I keyed the radio. Dispatch, NK7. During final walkthrough, C-deck corridor, 0623. Returned to same location twice without retracing steps. Awaiting instructions. Over. Static. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. NK7. Acknowledged. Remain in current location. Do not move. Dispatch is sending assistance. Stand by. Over. I stood in the corridor and waited. My flashlight beam illuminated Bay 4's door. I checked my watch. 6:25. I could hear the ocean, faint and distant, through the hull. At 6:31, I heard footsteps. Someone approaching from forward. I turned. A man in orange coveralls appeared Kearns. He was carrying a flashlight and a clipboard. He stopped 10 feet away. Which direction did you approach from? He asked. I pointed aft. That way. And you reached this spot again from which direction? I pointed forward. That way. He wrote something on the clipboard. Stay here. He walked aft. I waited. After 2 minutes, he came back. Walk with me, he said. Stay close. We walked aft together, past Bay 5, Bay 6, Bay 7, Bay 8. We reached the end of the corridor and turned left. We walked forward, past Bay 8, Bay 7, Bay 6. Normal sequence, no repetition. Kearns stopped and checked his clipboard. You're clear. Finish your walkthrough. What happened? Doesn't matter. It's corrected. He handed me a slip of paper. New amendment, effective immediately. I read it. 25. If you experience spatial disorientation, repetition of locations, altered distances, or missing sections of corridor, stop immediately and radio dispatch. Do not attempt to navigate until instructed. Assistance will be provided. Memorize it, Kearns said. Get back to work. He walked away. I put the slip in my pocket and resumed the final walkthrough. At 7, I finished. At 8, I met Greer and reported the incident. He wrote it down. You followed the rules? Yes. Good. On the 28th night, I met a new crew member. It was 23:15. I was on D deck, checking door seals, when a woman approached from aft. She was young, maybe 23, with short blonde hair and nervous eyes. She wore orange coveralls and an orange badge. I could see the badge number, NK9. Excuse me, she said. I'm new. Started yesterday. Can you help me? I stopped. Help with what? I'm supposed to check the watertight doors, but I don't know which ones. My supervisor said all of them, but she looked around. There are so many doors. Check the ones on D deck and C deck, I said. Between 01 and 01:15. It's in the rules. She nodded. Okay, thanks. She started to walk away, then stopped. One more thing. The knocking. I heard it last night, on C deck. Should I? Don't respond, I said. Just keep working, even if someone needs help. No one needs help between 03 and 05. She stared at me. How do you know? Because it's in the rules. She nodded slowly. Right, the rules. She turned and walked aft. I watched her go, then continued my patrol. At 2:37, I was on E deck when I heard a scream. Female, distant, coming from somewhere below. I ran to the portside stairwell and descended. Sub-level 1. The scream came again, louder, from the far end near the starboard stairwell. I ran down the catwalk. At the red door, I saw her NK9, the new crew member. She was standing with her back pressed against the bulkhead, staring at the red door. The door was open, not just unlocked. Open. I could see the corridor beyond dark, stretching deep into the platform, farther than should be possible. I heard someone inside, she said. Her voice was shaking. They called my name. I opened the door to check Rule 5. I said, do not enter sub-level 2 under any circumstances. I didn't enter. I just opened the door. Close it, now. She didn't move. She was staring into the corridor. I grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the door. I stepped forward and grabbed the door handle. Inside the corridor, something moved. A shadow, tall and wrong, shifting in the darkness. I pulled the door closed. It resisted for a second, as if something was holding it from the other side. Then it gave. The door sealed with a thud. I turned the wheel lock and secured it. I turned to NK9. Go back to E deck. Now. I heard my name. It doesn't matter. Go. She ran. I watched her reach the stairs and climb out of sight. I stayed at the red door, one hand on the wheel lock, and waited. I could hear something on the other side. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving away. After 2 minutes, the footsteps stopped. I climbed to E deck and radioed dispatch. NK7. Incident on sub-level 1. Crew member NK9 opened door to sub-level 2. Door now closed and secured. Recommend immediate supervisor contact with NK9. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Dispatch will handle. Continue assigned tasks. Out. At 4:15, I returned to sub-level 1. The red door was closed. The wheel lock was secure. The handprint was off. Gone again. The door was clean. At 8, I met Greer. I told him everything. He wrote it down. NK9 has been reassigned, he said. You won't see her again. What happened to her? She broke Rule 5. He closed his clipboard. She's off the platform. Medical evac. In a manner of speaking. He looked at me. You followed the rules. Yes, good. Get some rest. On the 30th night, Kearns called me to the conference room. Sit. I sat. He slid 2 sheets of paper across the table. Final amendments, effective immediately. I picked them up. The first sheet had 4 new rules, numbered 26 through 29. The second sheet was labeled Emergency Protocol Addendum. Emergency Protocol 26. If you observe any door opening on its own, do not approach it. Mark the location, radio dispatch, and avoid that corridor for the remainder of your shift. 27. If you complete a task and immediately forget that you completed it, verify the task using your written log before repeating it. If your log confirms completion but you have no memory of it, radio dispatch and wait for instructions. 28. If you encounter any crew member who appears injured or in distress between 3 and 5, do not offer assistance. Observe from a distance and report to dispatch. Assistance will be provided by authorized personnel. 29. If you find yourself in a location you did not intentionally navigate to, stop immediately. Radio dispatch and describe your surroundings. Do not attempt to navigate until instructed. I set the first sheet down and read the second. Emergency Protocol Addendum. In the event of primary power failure, equipment malfunction, or severe weather requiring extended emergency protocols, the following rules supersede standard operational protocols. E1. Upon activation of emergency protocols, proceed immediately to the E-deck break room. Remain there until receiving instructions from dispatch. Monitor Channel 4. Do not leave for any reason except as instructed by dispatch. E2. If instructed, to perform tasks during emergency protocols, complete each task in the exact sequence provided. Report completion after each task. Do not deviate from the sequence. Do not combine tasks. Do not anticipate instructions. E3. Time limits provided during emergency protocols are strict. If you cannot complete a task within the time limit, radio dispatch immediately and return to the E-deck break room. Do not attempt to finish the task. E4. If communication with dispatch is lost during emergency protocols, remain in your current location for 15 minutes. If communication is not restored within 15 minutes, proceed to the E-deck break room and remain there until communication is restored or until daylight, 6 or later. E5. During emergency protocols, all standard rules remain in effect unless explicitly overridden by dispatch instructions. If an instruction conflicts with a standard rule, request clarification before proceeding. I read both sheets 3 times. When I looked up, Kearns was watching me. Storm season's getting worse, he said. We're expecting another big one in the next week, maybe 2 or 3 more before winter. What happens if I can't complete a task during emergency protocols? You tell dispatch. They'll send someone else or delay the task. He stood. Or the task doesn't get done and we deal with the consequences. What consequences? He didn't answer. Your shift starts in 90 minutes. That night was quiet. No storms, no incidents. The routine was automatic now. Equipment locker, primary walkthrough, break room, bilge pumps, door checks, inventory, patrol, final walkthrough, log. At 2:30 I checked the port side watertight door. Closed. I left it closed. At 3 I heard knocking on C-deck. I ignored it. At 4:15 I descended to sub-level 1. The handprint was there. I photographed it, uploaded it, moved on. At 5:30 I started the final walkthrough. At 7 I finished. At 8 I signed the log. Greer asked if I had anything to report. No, I said. Routine night. Good. On the 34th night, the second storm hit. It came fast. At 22:47 I was on D-deck when the platform shuddered. The vibration changed. Deeper, more violent. The radio crackled. All units, this is dispatch. Storm conditions in effect. Night shift. Proceed to E-deck break room and stand by for emergency protocols. Acknowledge. Over. I keyed the radio. NK7. Acknowledged. Proceeding to E-deck break room. Over. I reached the break room at 22:53. Closed the door. Sat at the table. The platform groaned. The lights flickered but stayed on. At 23:07 the radio crackled. NK7, this is dispatch. Emergency protocols active. Stand by for instructions. Over. NK7, standing by. Over. At 23:14, NK7, first instruction. Proceed to sub-level 1. Verify all bilge pumps operational. Report readings. Time limit, 15 minutes. Begin now. Over. I descended to sublevel 1. The pumps were running, but the gauges were fluctuating more than during the first storm. Pump 1, 41, 43, 42. Pump 2, 44, 46, 45. I recorded the highest and lowest readings for each pump, all within range. At 23:26, I radioed dispatch. NK7. Bilge pumps operational. Readings fluctuating but within acceptable range. Pump 1, 41 to 43. Pump 2, 44 to 46. Pump 3, 42 to 44. Pump 4, 40 to 43. Pump 5, 44 to 47. Pump 6, 42 to 45. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Second instruction. Check all watertight doors on D deck and C deck. Report any unsealed doors. Time limit, 20 minutes. Begin now. Over. I checked my watch. 23:28. I climbed to D deck and started checking doors. All sealed. C deck. Door C11 was open. I logged it but didn't close it. Rule 16. I moved on. All other doors sealed. At 23:44 I radioed dispatch. NK7. Watertight doors checked. All sealed except door C11, which was found open per previous incident. Not closed per Rule 16. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Third instruction. Inventory emergency supply cabinet. Verify all items present. Time limit, 10 minutes. Begin now. Over. I checked my watch. 23:46. I went to E-Deck and found the emergency supply cabinet. Padlock secure. I unlocked it and counted. 12 flares, 6 batteries, 3 flashlights, 2 radios, 1 first aid kit, 8 bottles of water, everything accounted for. At 23:53 I radioed dispatch. NK7. Emergency supply cabinet inventoried. All items present and accounted for. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Return to E-Deck, break room and stand by. Over. I locked the cabinet and went back to the break room. Closed the door. The platform was rolling harder now. The storm had intensified. At 0:17 the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in. Red strips, barely enough to see. The radio crackled. NK7, this is dispatch. Primary power failure. Emergency lighting active. Fourth instruction. Proceed to the port side watertight door at the base of the E-Deck stairwell. If open, close and secure. If closed, verify secure. Report status. Time limit, 10 minutes. Begin now. Over. I descended to the base of the stairwell. The red door was open, wide open. The corridor beyond it was visible in my flashlight beam. I could see 30 feet this time. Pipes, concrete, shadows that moved. I grabbed the door and pulled. It was heavier than before. I used both hands. It moved slowly, inch by inch. Something was resisting on the other side. I pulled harder. The door closed halfway. I could see the corridor narrowing as the door swung. Something tall was standing in the corridor, 20 feet back. Not moving, just standing. I pulled the door the rest of the way closed. It sealed with a thud. I turned the wheel lock and secured it. I tested it. Secure. At 0:24 I radioed dispatch. NK7. Port side watertight door was open, now closed and secured. Resistance noted while closing. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Return to E-Deck break room and stand by. Over. I climbed the stairs and went back to the break room. The platform shuddered. Metal groaned. I sat at the table and waited. At 0:53 I heard knocking on the break room door. 3 raps. Pause. 3 raps. I didn't respond. The knocking continued for 8 minutes. Then it stopped. At 1:18 the lights came back on. Full power. The ventilation resumed. The radio crackled. NK7, this is dispatch. Primary power restored. Emergency protocols remain in effect. Fifth instruction. Perform sub-level 1 inventory. Check all equipment for damage or leaks. Photograph any anomalies. Time limit, 30 minutes. Begin now. Over. I descended to sub-level 1. The bilge pumps looked normal. I walked the catwalk, checking each unit. No leaks, no damage. At the red door, I stopped. The door was clean, no handprint, but the wheel lock was loose. Not unlocked, but loose, as if someone had tried to turn it from the inside. I tightened the wheel lock and tested it. Secure. I photographed it and uploaded the image. At 1:42, I radioed dispatch. NK7. Sub-level 1 inventory complete. No equipment damage or leaks observed. Anomaly noted. Wheel lock on sub-level 2 door was loose. Tightened and secured. Photographed. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. 6th instruction. Perform complete walkthrough of all levels. Report any anomalies, unsealed doors, or safety hazards. Time limit. 60 minutes. Begin now. Over. I checked my watch. 1:44. I started the walkthrough. E deck, normal. D deck, normal. C deck, normal, except door C11 still open. I avoided Bay 11 and Bay 12. B deck, normal. A deck, control room observed, normal. At 2:36 I radioed dispatch. NK7. Complete walkthrough finished. No new anomalies. Door C11 remains open per previous incident. All other doors sealed. No safety hazards observed. Over. NK7. Acknowledged. Emergency protocols concluded. Resume standard operational protocols. Continue assigned tasks. Out. I checked my watch. 2:38. I was behind schedule again. I resumed standard patrol. At 3 I heard my name. I didn't respond. At 3:15 I heard knocking on C deck. I ignored it. At 4:15 I descended to sub-level 1 for the scheduled inventory. The bilge pumps were normal. The red door was closed and secured. The handprint had returned. Fresh. Wet. I photographed it, uploaded it, moved on. At 5:30 I started the final walkthrough. At 7 I finished. At 8 I signed the log and met Greer. Storm protocols. Yes. You followed all instructions. Yes. Good. Get some rest. The storms came every 3 or 4 days after that. Each time, emergency protocols were activated. Each time, I completed the instructions in sequence, reported completion, and resumed standard operations. Between storms, the routine continued. Knocking, voices, unsealed doors, handprints, footprints, blue badges, motionless crew members, spatial disorientation. I followed the rules. I logged everything. I reported everything. I survived. On the 42nd night, I found Pardee. It was 4:15. I descended to sub-level 1 for the scheduled inventory. The bilge pumps were normal. I walked the catwalk toward the red door. Pardee was there, standing in the same spot as before, near the door, his back to me, completely motionless. I stopped 50 feet away and counted. 60 seconds. He didn't move. I started to turn back when I noticed something. He was closer to the door than last time. Much closer. His hand was on the wheel lock. I keyed the radio. Dispatch, NK7. Crew member NK3 observed on sub-level 1, near door to sub-level 2. Hand on wheel lock. Motionless. Per Rule 18. No approach made. Advise. Over. Static. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. NK7. Acknowledged. Do not approach. Do not engage. Exit sub-level 1 immediately and proceed to E-deck break room. Stand by for further instructions. Over. I climbed the stairs to E-deck and went to the break room. Closed the door. Waited. At 4:23 the radio crackled. NK7. Remain in break room until 05:30. Do not return to sub-level 1. Resume standard patrol at 05:30. Out. I stayed in the break room until 5:30. When I left, I didn't go back to sub-level 1. At 5:30 I started the final walkthrough. I completed it by 7. At 8 I met Greer. Anything to report? I told him about Pardee. He wrote it down. NK3 has been reassigned, he said. Off the platform? Yes. He closed his clipboard. You won't see him again. On the 48th night, I completed my scheduled rotation. It was my last shift. 6 months. 144 nights. I had survived. At 7:30 I finished the final walkthrough early. I returned to E-deck and stood outside the equipment locker, waiting for 8. The corridor was quiet. The machinery hummed. The platform vibrated. At 7:55, I signed the log and returned the radio, flashlight, and toolkit. At 8, Greer met me outside the locker. "Your rotation is complete," he said. "Helicopter departs at 1400 hours. Pack your berth and report to the helipad by 1350. That's it?" "That's it." He handed me a clipboard. "Sign the discharge form." I signed. He took the clipboard back. "One more thing," he said. He handed me a sealed envelope. "For the next person, your replacement arrives tonight." I took the envelope. It was heavy. I could feel papers inside. "What is it?" "Your notes," he said. "Your observations. Anything you think they should know that isn't in the official rules." I opened the envelope. Inside, blank pages and a pen. "You have 6 hours," Greer said. "Write what you need to write. Leave it on the table in the conference room before you go." He walked away. I went back to my berth and sat at the fold-down desk. I took out the blank pages and the pen. I thought about everything I had seen, everything I had heard, everything I had survived. I started writing. "To whoever reads this, you're starting night shift maintenance on Platform 7. You've read the rules. You've been briefed. You think you understand. You don't, but you will. I'm writing this because some things aren't in the official rules. Some things you have to learn. Some things I wish someone had told me. First, the rules are not suggestions. They are not guidelines. They are not subject to interpretation. You follow them exactly as written. If you don't understand a rule, ask before your shift starts. Once you're on shift, it's too late. Second, the platform changes at night. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean physically. Corridors that were 30 feet long during the day are 50 feet long at night. Doors that were locked are unlocked. Things that should be impossible happen. You will see them. You will document them. You will not try to explain them. You will not try to rationalize them. You will follow the rules and move on. Third, you will hear things, knocking, voices, footsteps, conversations. Your name, someone asking for help, someone asking for the time, someone crying, someone screaming. You will not respond. You will not investigate. You will continue your assigned tasks. The rules are clear about this. Follow them. Fourth, you will see things. People in blue badges during hours they shouldn't be there. Crew members who stand motionless for longer than any human should. Handprints and footprints that appear and disappear. Shadows that move wrong. Doors that open on their own. You will not approach. You will document, report, and move on. Fifth, Sublevel 2 is off limits for a reason. The door will open sometimes. You will close it. You will not look inside. You will not listen to anything you hear from inside. You will not respond if someone calls your name from inside. You will close the door, secure the wheel lock, and leave. Sixth, during storms, emergency protocols are strict. Follow every instruction exactly. Complete each task in sequence. Report completion. Do not deviate. Do not combine tasks. Do not try to save time. The time limits are strict because they need to be. If you can't complete a task in time, report it and return to the break room. Better to leave a task undone than to break the rules. Seventh, you will meet other night shift workers. Some of them are real, some of them are not. The only way to tell the difference is by following the rules. Check badges. Verify badge numbers against the roster. Ask for shift codes. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Report it and move on. Eighth, you will doubt yourself. You will wonder if what you're seeing is real. You will wonder if you're imagining things. You will wonder if the rules are necessary. They are. Every rule exists because someone broke it and something bad happened. Don't be the person who proves why a new rule is needed. Ninth, you will be tired. You will be isolated. You will be afraid. This is normal. Everyone who works night shift feels this. You will want to talk to someone about it. Don't. The rules say not to discuss incidents with other crew members. There's a reason for that. Keep your observations too. Document them in your logs. Report them to dispatch and the day shift supervisor. Move on. 10th, you will survive this if you follow the rules. I did. Others have. Others didn't. The difference was the rules. One more thing. At the end of your rotation, you'll be asked to write notes for the next person. You'll think about what to say. You'll wonder how much to tell them. Here's my advice. Tell them enough to survive, but not so much that they don't take it seriously. Fear is useful. It keeps you sharp. It keeps you careful. It keeps you alive. Good luck, NK7. I read what I had written twice. Then I folded the pages, put them in the envelope, and sealed it. At 13:40, I left my berth for the last time. I carried my duffel to the helipad and waited. At 13:55, the helicopter landed. I climbed inside. At 14, we lifted off. I looked down at the platform as we climbed. From above, it looked small. Just a cluster of steel and rust in the middle of the ocean. I could see crew members on the decks, moving between modules, going about their work. Somewhere down there, someone was starting their first night shift. They had read the rules. They had been briefed. They thought they understood. They would learn. The helicopter turned east, toward Scotland. The platform shrank behind us until it was just a dot on the horizon. I didn't look back again. I reached Aberdeen at 16:30. By 17, I was in a taxi heading home. By 19, I was in Glasgow, standing in my kitchen, looking at the stack of collection notices I'd left on the counter 6 months ago. I had $43,000 in my account now, enough to pay my sister's bills, enough to clear the debts. I opened a beer and sat at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. No machinery hum, no vibration, no radio static, just silence. It felt wrong. I checked my watch. 1934. In 2 hours and 26 minutes, someone would be signing the log at the equipment locker on E-deck. They would pick up a radio, a flashlight, and a toolkit. They would start their primary walkthrough. At 23:30, they would sit in the break room and wait for the radio tones. At 0:15, they would descend to sub-level 1 and check the bilge pumps. At 2:30, they would check the port side watertight door. At 3, they would hear knocking. They would not respond. At 4:15, they would go back to sub-level 1. They would see the handprint on the red door. They would photograph it. They would move on. They would follow the rules. They would survive. Or they wouldn't. I finished my beer and went to bed. I set my alarm for 8. Normal hours, day shift hours. I closed my eyes. I dreamed of the ocean.